This program has been made possible in part by the following sponsors. The Trial Lawyers Association of BC. The Vancouver Courier newspaper. KCM Wealth Management. So what about the downtown east side? The Four Pillars approach, legalization, Vancouver area network of drug users, millions and billions of dollars going into specific neighborhoods. These are subjects we have covered in the past on this program, but today, a very special guest who has a different perspective, John McKay, 35 years a police officer, actually began practically before there were police. He was first an RCMP officer, and then in Winnipeg, working the Main Street run, which I grew up in Winnipeg, so I know what that's like. And then with Vancouver Police for many, many years, and worked on the downtown east side. In particular, did a lot of work developing relationships with people who are mentally ill and with sex trade workers and so on, and retired just a few years ago and runs his own company called Defensive Tactics. In other words, protect yourself. That's a whole other story. John, great to see you.
Thanks, David.
Great to see you. Don't have any bumps or anything. Nobody's beating you up.
I'm the teacher.
Yeah, you're exactly.
Somebody else has bumps.
Just for the sake of history, I have to know, when you were a Winnipeg police officer walking the beat, did you actually get to wear the buffalo coat?
No, I came on.
You missed it.
Yeah, I did. I came on in '81, and the buffalo coat had gone a few years before that. Thank goodness, because I wasn't tall enough to wear one.
I had one.
Did you?
I had a Winnipeg Police buffalo coat, and I used to wear it. When I was running my treatment program there.
Yeah,
it was very funny.
Well, they're meant for taller people than me.
Yes.
I think it'd be dragging along behind me. You know?
So is that why you became such a tough guy, because you weren't tall?
No, I don't think so. I don't think it was all that tough, actually. But I was interested in the martial arts. I started doing wrestling in high school in Montreal. And then I moved over to boxing. And then when I moved to Winnipeg, I started practicing karate, then judo. And I did that for karate for a number of years. I still practice now.
Yes.
I still practice. But then I became a police officer, and from time to time, not often, the training came in handy, you know.
Well, why do you say whenever someone phones you or whenever you send a message, you always end all your messages with "be safe"?
Yeah, stay safe.
Stay safe.
Well, because I think when people call me, they call me about business or stuff like that. And the business that I do is I teach people and organizations how to remain safe dealing with clients that they have who get out of control. Mainly, that's who we train. So the object of the lesson is every day you have to stay safe. You have to, no matter what your job is, if you're dealing with people who are, get upset, get owly, get angry, get physical, you have to go home at the end of the day.
Yeah, some of your clients over the years have been sports and entertainment people.
Yes.
And so you've helped people control or try to control large venues. You know, if we have the Beatles or whomever, at the arena, that's a big deal. That's a lot of human bodies in one space, and they may or may not be revved up on some of their favorite drinks or other substances. Yeah. That could be kind of a spooky assignment.
Well, it's dealing with crowd management is really interesting because the goal is to prevent things from happening. So there's a number of strategies around that. But when push comes to shove and you have to get into it, there's a lot more people involved on that side of the equation there is on the security police side of the equation.
Really?
Yeah, and at these events, whether it's Rogers or BC Place or the P&E, it can get, when somebody starts, it runs like a virus. It starts, somebody starts with somebody else, then 4 people get in, then 8 people are in, and now 16, it just multiplies on itself very quickly. So you have to get in and stop it fairly quickly.
Folklore has it that the toughest room to play is Three Rivers Stadium in Pittsburgh. When the Steelers are playing, we're told that people are absolutely primeval.
Yeah, well, it's funny. I worked when I was with the Vancouver Police Department. I did call-outs, and it was in the days when we had the basketball team here, the Grizzlies.
Sure, yeah,
you know, and so you had hockey, football, and basketball. And of the three venues, the three sports, basketball had the least amount of conflict in it.
I was going to say, I was at those games because I used to work for the radio station, and I had access to all those things, and they seemed very civilized, very civil.
Yeah, and it's because there's a lot of children there.
Yes.
And the culture is very different. And when the sort of the one that's in between basketball and football is hockey.
Yes.
There are lots of kids involved in that, and it depends on what teams are playing. Football has its own culture, it's rough and tumble, and you tend to have more conflict amongst fans in the stands at football games than you do at hockey or you did at basketball, certainly.
So this inevitably leads to, and I don't want to spend the whole program talking about this, because we had Sergeant Howard Chow talking specifically about the riot.
Yes.
But it's hard to avoid that subject. I know you don't want to go on about it, but you did work for so many years in crowd control, and it is an area of expertise. What do you make of all this? The Sun recently did a survey asking citizens, do they think that the city and the police are prepared to never let this happen again? My sense is that it's hard to avoid.
Well, yeah, if you look at all the events we've had, I mean, I came to Vancouver first in 1976 till 80, and then I came back in 84. And I remember the bathtub races and Sea Festival and Greek Days and First Night, and all these events that we've ever had have all been canceled because of rowdyism and hooliganism over the years, right?
Yes.
I mean, if you go back in the footage from the 60s around the Grey Cup, you can see the riots that occurred on West Georgia Street outside the Hotel Vancouver, and the Vancouver police putting, so rioting at sports events and different kind of events is not new to the city. It's
I'm sure as
been around forever.
I'm sure as not only a former policeman, but as a kind of deputy to two chiefs, your heart goes out to what Jim Chu and the rest of the police department had to endure since this horrible night.
You know, it's a very difficult proposition. I think the idea was to recapture the Olympic spirit a year later, as the Canucks went. And
but what a different thing that is! It's a totally different thing.
Yeah, it is. It is a totally different thing. And and you could see the crowds build, and it was just like I was in the riot in '94, the same Stanley Cup. And it was the same thing over and over and over again. But it wasn't this big.
Yes.
That riot was not nearly as big as the one that occurred
is
in
it
2011.
Stoppable? Is it preventable?
It is, but you need lots of resources.
Lots of bodies.
Yeah, lots of bodies.
Lots of
people.
toys, lots of equipment?
Not so much equipment. You need the ability to screen, basically, to prevent things from happening.
Screen?
First of all. Yeah, so screen people when they come in, screen them on the train, screen them in the cars.
Screening as in, are you drunk?
Yeah, are you carrying liquor?
Yeah.
Are you carrying weapons? Are you a gang member? All this kind of thing. Because the Brits have been dealing with this for years, and they've got it down to a fine science, but their culture is very different in Britain than it is here with that stuff.
Yes.
And so if you start, fencing off areas, and you have to buy a ticket to get in, for instance, like the celebration of lights, if you start doing that, what happens is the culture isn't willing to accept that here in Vancouver, right? Whereas in Britain, that's how it goes. So they've been able to minimize the effects of the hooliganism at the soccer games by implementing laws and rules.
Other countries don't do so well.
That's right.
Italy, Greece, a lot of the countries closer to the equator, man, soccer games, terrifying.
It's out of control.
Yeah, out of control.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So it's sort of a cultural norm here with things, and I think the idea of capturing the Olympic spirit, it's a nice idea. Do you know what I mean? It's nice. You want that all the families to be there. But the families didn't come, right? The hooligans came. The hooligans took over, and it was very difficult once that occurred with that number of people. to split them up into groups where you could, kind of break down the synergy of this stuff, and get them to move along. And then you're also dealing with all the people that want to be there to film this and look at it and say, yeah, I was there when this happened. And that's not helpful to dealing with the riders, because there's no uniforms. Riders don't say, hey, look at me, I have this uniform, we can pick on them and leave everybody else out of the equation. It doesn't work that way, And it was very difficult. And I think that again, we've learned a lot. Let's hope in 17 years' time, we remember the lessons of '94 and 2011.
What happens 17 years from now?
What
am I missing?
Well, when the next Stanley Cup.
The next.
It shows up in Vancouver.
Okay. Now, look, it's a terrible time to change topics, but enough about that. We've only got a couple of minutes before our break. But let's dive into that nightmare we all know and love called the downtown East Side. My sense of it, having been here almost 50 years, it wasn't the greatest place in the world when I first came here, but I felt reasonably safe. I used to go to clubs like the Smiling Buddha.
Yes.
You could go to the Ovaltine Cafe behind the police station and so on without feeling you were about to be killed.
Yes.
Today, as far as I'm concerned, it's a nightmare.
Yeah, I think it's worse now than it was 10 years ago when I first went down there.
Yes.
I was the officer in charge of that area for 3 years, 2004
In what
to
ways
2006.
is it worse? Before we talk about why, in what practical, visible ways is it worse?
Well, if you look at the people now, you'll see people down there, the addicted people, mentally ill, who are missing limbs. It looks like a war zone a lot of times, and what that's a product of being into that hospital so many times with addiction issues leading to injuries, leading to gangrene, leading to all kinds of bone, issues. So now you have people down there that are missing, half an arm or a leg below the knee, and you never used to see this before. The mentally ill are not looked after in our country at all. So we can't take the blame for that here in Vancouver because it's no better in Toronto or anywhere else.
Yes.
We don't care for the mentally ill. And many of the people that are down there are mentally ill and drug addicted, and now they're called multiple diagnosed because they've got HIV/AIDS and everything else, hepatitis A, B, C.
And you know what's so amazing? Yesterday I was looking at a document that is a product of the provincial government. That's their 10-year plan for dealing with mental illness and addiction. And it claims that in 10 years we're going to be living in Shangri-La and everybody's going to be healthy and happy.
Yeah.
And obviously I don't put a lot of stock in a document like this, but let me assure you that all the mandarins in office, not just elected office, but who are employed, they all think that everything's being taken care of.
Yeah, well, I'm sure they do think that, but realistically, it's not being taken care of. A friend of mine is a psychiatrist, and he deals with.
I'm sorry to hear that.
He's a really good guy.
Okay.
But he's, we're friends, so he'll speak to me about things that, he wouldn't say publicly, because if he does, that'll be the end of his practice. So he tells me, and I got this from another person who deals with the mentally ill, and we have in British Columbia more than 300 cases of schizophrenia a year. Every year we get 300 more. And they need long-term care, and they're not going to get it.
And they're not getting it.
They're not going to get it either.
We got to hold on that dreadful thought. That's a shocking thing to say, but we got to just stop right there, take a little breather, catch our breath. Remind everybody, davidberner.com is the site to go to. By the way, we're going to redo that site very soon. I think you'll like the changes. And say thank you to the wonderful people who help us bring this program to you here on Shaw Community Television, Cable 4. We'll be back in a minute with John McKay. This program has been made possible in part by the following sponsors. The Vancouver Courier newspaper. KCM Wealth Management. The Trial Lawyers Association of BC. All right, we're back with John McKay, former Vancouver policeman, now running a company of his own called Defensive Tactics, along with his buddy Joel. And we were talking about the downtown east side. So you've described that it looks worse. Now, why is it worse?
Well, it's worse, I think, because the four pillars approach that is now 11 years old was a dismal failure.
In what way?
Well, if you remember, David, when they first started marketing it, there was four pillars: prevention, treatment, enforcement, and harm reduction.
Right.
And it was at that time when it first came out in 2001 that I was assigned down in District 2, which includes the downtown east side. And I was told to get involved with a number of these issues because I was on the street. Very quickly after 2001, when this is rolled out, around about 2003, 2004, we began to recognize that there wasn't going to be a prevention message. In other words, there was no message at all that drug use is bad for you, and to this day, there isn't one. There's no message from. Do you know
what the official health position and British Columbia government position is?
No.
The official position is we don't have substance abuse. We have substance use. And you know why? Because there's a whole long treatise in provincial literature about bad language. And if I say to you that you suffer from substance abuse, I'm being mean to you.
Yes. Yeah, we went through that one too, where the mayor's conference on prevention in 2004, their message about prevention was their sole purpose of prevention was to prevent the stigma of drug addiction. Prevent drug addicts from being stigmatized.
Yeah.
That was
not preventing drug addiction, but preventing the stigma.
That's right. That's right. That's what it was. And then then the treatment issue came along, and we tried this because we call for treatment. We did these phone calls where we'd say, well, look, I need help, and you couldn't get any help. So when they would say to us that we spend $60 million a year on treatment, that was all treatment for people who had medical plans. That wasn't treatment for 16,000 people down there who were either mentally ill and drug addicted, because that was basically the division, because they had no medical plans and they weren't going to get any treatment, right? So that was the end of that. And then the enforcement arm, which we were involved in to a large degree, every time we did something that would help the community in some way or another. For instance, the businesses in Gastown and Chinatown were really suffering, particularly if they were closer to Hastings Street or Carroll Street. They were really suffering because the addicts would inject in the alcoves of their buildings, and there was human urine and defecation and all this stuff. And of course, if you went over on Pender Street on a hot summer's day, it smelled like a sewer. Well, it smelled like a sewer because the alley was where the homeless and the mentally ill were defecating on, in the alley. So what happened was we got permission from the federal government, and the provincial government supported us on this, that if we found people using drugs in a business alcove at any time, that we would charge them with possession. And they agreed to prosecute that. Well, you'd have thought we'd have suggested that we're
going to hang them.
Yeah, we're going to hang them.
Draw and quarter them.
Oh, yeah. There was an uproar. And Vandu was all upset about this, and Coastal Health was upset. And of course, they started sending letters to the chief demanding that Inspector Rolls and I be fired, particularly me, because I've written a couple of things and said a couple of things. So
I got a call last week from a man who, along with his business partners, has had the audacity to try to refurbish, clean up, and beautify and change some old buildings and hotels in the downtown east side.
Yes.
And he is, of course, being vilified by everybody for that worst of all sins. I think it's in the Bible, called gentrification.
Yes.
Shame on him.
I think it was 2004, 2005. It was 2005, I think. There was a visioning meeting held by different, Coastal Health was involved, and the police went to these visioning meetings at different levels, right?
Yes.
And the vision for the downtown east side by all the mandarins that were involved in this addiction business, both from the city and from health, was this, is that the downtown east side would be an area where the prostitution laws didn't exist, The drug laws didn't exist.
Yes.
And one person in particular who was with a social activist group wanted the police not to carry guns, but they wanted an emblem on their arm that had a happy face, so that they would know that we were the downtown happy face police. And so this was the vision.
Are you making that part up?
No, I'm not. No, I'm not making it up. No.
I see. I thought
I
our
could give you
guest
his
was
name,
John.
but I won't.
I thought our guest was John McKay. I didn't realize it was Robin Williams.
No, so I said to this person, I said, my father in World War II fought against people who had emblems on there, and we're not going down that road because you have no idea the kind of stuff that we have to deal with every day. It's not going to happen. So this was the visioning process, and this is what they actually wanted to achieve, was this utopia in the downtown east side where there were no drug laws, everything was just the way it was. So at that point in time, we began to refer to this as the giant petri dish called the downtown east side, where all these experiments were taking place, and social experiments and all this kind of stuff. And the people that were being experimented on were the mentally ill and the drug addicted who didn't have treatment or care or anything else, were just left on their own.
We are told $1 million a day goes into that 4 square blocks for various social programs.
I think that's very likely. I think that I read the National Post article that came out in 2009, and I think they estimated that from 2001 to the end of 2008, 3 levels of government spent $1.4 billion in the downtown east side. So, for instance, if you go in any of the buildings down, the office buildings are over on Pender Street, a little bit further west, and you go up, you'll see these names on the doors. This name of this society that does something. There's we counted 137 agencies in that area that were being supported by government money, taxpayers' money, but nobody knew what they did or what was achieved or what and nobody audited it. And at one point in time, out of frustration, I was at a meeting with a number of them, and I said, I think that we should get an auditor in and audit what everybody does. Well, it was lucky that I had some people with me, because I almost never made it out alive from that meeting.
There is a group of active drug users who believe it's their God-given right to be drug users, and they believe that's somewhere in the charter. They also believe, by the way, that the charter, guarantees that people can get needles because that's so-called health care. But there's nowhere in the charter, apparently, where people are guaranteed treatment, oddly enough. Anyways, there's this group, and they're proud to be drug users, and they present themselves as a kind of union called Vandu, Vancouver Area Network of Drug Users. Now, what do you make of the fact that the city of Vancouver gives these people $250,000 a year?
Well, it's a really odd thing. To me, it's ridiculous when you have a group like that of drug users, addicts, and they get supported to do what? I don't know what it is they're supposed to do, but I'll tell you
this. I think it's to use drugs.
Well,
could be.
Well, the other thing they do is they protest laws. So, for instance, every year there'd be a protest, and Vandu would show up, and it was funny. The president of Vandu, of course, I got to know him. And there was a couple of times when he was badly addicted, and he borrowed money from me. And and you know him on a first name basis. He always talked to me, and I talked to him. Of course, you know everybody. When you talk to him. So I'd lend him money for food or whatever. And then one day he brought them, and they were protesting outside, the building. And I went down and I said, "So I lend you money, and you come here and you scream and protest."
Yeah, of course.
I said, "That's not fair." He says, "You know what it's like. Come on, you know what we're doing here." It was like this thing, right? So the latest thing they've done is they started this group called Cop Watch.
I know Cop Watch.
They go around and they watch the police and they make notes. Well, I think. And I might be wrong about this, but I'm pretty sure it is. It's funded by Vandu. It's all Vandu people, right? So now you've got $250,000 a year that somebody gives to Vandu, whether it's provincial or municipal or both. And what they're doing now is they're following around the police and making notes as to what they do.
So the mayor, who is in effect the chief of police, is putting up money to allow to encourage drug users to follow the police
Yeah, I
around.
don't get it.
Well, maybe it's a good thing. Maybe if they're following the police around, they're behaving themselves or something. Yeah. Listen, very quickly, we got about a minute and a half left.
Yeah.
Why are doctors being muscled to not express their thoughts and opinions?
Well, the Mandarins, that you use the word Mandarins, and I agree with it. They didn't want anybody on the inside of the healthcare system saying bad things about harm reduction and the 4 pillars, right?
Yes.
And so they were told they were muzzled. And if anybody spoke out about it, they'd lose their practice because they didn't want any, like silence.
They would lose their practice?
Yeah, that's what I've been told. They lose their practice. I've been told that by more doctors. Every doctor I talk to, what happens if you spoke up? I'd lose my practice. So what happens is so by not speaking out, it appeared to everybody that every medical person in British Columbia was supportive of this 4 pillars approach.
Yes,
Nothing
exactly.
could be further from the truth. They weren't, but they didn't dare say anything. Now, when the public said stuff, Vandu would show up and protest outside their building. So the Business Improvement Association in Gastown, there was a business there that had really a bad time with the daily protest. It interrupted their business. And after a while, they just learned to say, we're going to have to go along with this because our business is suffering because of the constant protest. It happened to a guy a doctor in New Westminster as well, about 2-3 years ago.
Actually, I thought I knew just about everything about this subject, but I've never heard anybody talk about that aspect of the medical profession.
Yeah.
John, we're pretty much out of time. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome.
Wonderful to hear your perspective on these issues.
Well, it's wonderful to be here and be able to talk without making somebody in the department mad.
You never know.
Well, they never know.
Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
Folks, that's
Thanks,
it. That's it. John McKay has been our guest from Defensive Tactics. Next week, the studio's dark, so we dig into our archives, and we're going to repeat a show that we did in our first season. A wonderful guy, Ted Topping, who has a company called Creative Insights, Inc., and he specializes in teaching people how to provide service, like in retail stores and in coffee shops and so on. So it was a wonderful, fascinating episode, and I think you'll enjoy it. That's next week. As always, thank you for being with us, and thanks to our sponsors for allowing us to bring this to you here on Shaw Community Television, Cable 4. Good night.